Happy Father's Day, everyone. Special prayers and remembrances for our fathers, stepfathers, grandfathers, uncles, father-in-laws, brother-in-laws, teachers, people who've been men, important parts of our lives, sharing life and love and faith with all of us. Blessings to all of you on this day. You know, folks, we celebrate a tradition today, like Father's Day. Just as last month we celebrated Mother's Day. That too is a great tradition. Another wonderful tradition we have in our country, kind of a familial kind of tradition, is celebrations of Thanksgiving. We are people who like celebrating our traditions. There's familial kind of Thanksgiving, there's kind of familial celebrations. Also, there's civic celebrations that are traditions too. You know, Independence Day, Memorial Day, Labor Day. These kinds of days are all important to us for different kinds of reasons. People like traditions, they like celebrating these things for any one of a number of reasons. But I think also people sometimes notice that traditions will change and be accepting of changes. I mean, for example, Decoration Day long ago gave way to Memorial Day. People still accept that in the heart. Many of our federal holidays are now moved back to the nearest Monday. But some days, like Independence Day, are always celebrated on the day. We keep these things in mind. It's good for us to remember. I think we worry a little more when certain kinds of traditions, change because they seem to lose their place. They get a little watered down. I think people become upset when they look at important days like Memorial Day, Labor Day, Independence Day, being seen by people more and more as, say, shopping opportunities and long weekends, or the ways in which sometimes people will see Christmas and Easter as commercial opportunities. People don't like seeing the traditions taken away in that sense. We are a people who are a people of tradition, we Catholics. And today we celebrate in our readings something special about what it means to be a people who follow traditions. For example, in our second reading today from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, take a listen to this. Brothers and sisters, I have received from the Lord what I also handed on to you. Folks, Paul is writing about what is at the heart of tradition, that which we have and hand on to others. Something given to us by the Lord, and we in turn give it to others who can help to extend this. Say how parents or grandparents have offered to their children and grandchildren, passing on faith, passing on what it means to be a Catholic person in the world today. Going on, Paul, in today's second reading, touches on something very important for us, and that's Eucharist. I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night he was handed over, took bread, and after he had given thanks, broke it, and said, "This is my body that is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." There are places in our scriptures that speak to us about how the depth of our Eucharistic tradition is so much part of our lives as Catholics. John 6 chapter is the centerpiece of this. And we have let's say, in 1 Corinthians 11 today, a reminder too about Jesus giving himself for us and asking us to do this in memory of him. Do this in remembrance of me. These were important things to keep in mind. As we celebrate Paul's speaking from the heart about tradition and Eucharist and who we are, let's remember also that our gospel speaks about this. And the gospel here today picks up something very special. Jesus is with the disciples, and it's a moment when the disciples are still being shaped and formed to become the disciples they have been blessed and called to be. In the gospel today, we have the experience of Jesus having gathered a crowd. Well, that happens a lot, doesn't it? And this crowd is a huge crowd. They say it's 5,000. They talk about just the men. Imagine how large the crowd must have been when you include the women and children. And Jesus is teaching. And at the end of the day, and the people have been hanging on to Jesus' word all day long. You can imagine they're tired and they're hungry. Jesus wants to see something about how the disciples have been listening to him and following his example. He asked them a question. And actually, they approach him and they say, "Master, dismiss the crowd so that they can go into the surrounding villages and farms to find lodging and provisions, for we are in a deserted place." No kidding. We can tell the disciples are saying this. Jesus is not saying this. Jesus would never dismiss the crowd. They came to hear him, and they seek Jesus. Jesus wants to provide. He wants to see if the disciples have been listening about what it means to feed the people, feed them in heart, feed them in soul. Well, Jesus asked the disciples, can they provide the food themselves? And of course, another sign that the disciples are still on the learning curve and are not quite ready, they respond by saying that all they have are 5 loaves and 2 fish, which for a crowd of this size, hey, it's not even table scraps. Well, Jesus invites them to have all the folks recline on the hillside and sit down in groups of 50. And they did so. And Jesus takes the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. He takes them into his hands, and he blesses them, and he breaks them, and has the disciples distribute them to the people. Now think about this. There's at least 5,000, certainly more, who are there, reclined on the ground waiting for food. There are 12 disciples. You know, folks, it's going to take a while to feed that number of people. Ever been to a restaurant and they're short of waiters and waitresses? It takes a while. But imagine what this looks like to the people. They see the disciples going out to the people and bringing them food. And when they're empty-handed, they go back, and Jesus gives them more food, and more food, and more food. And this is happening over a period of time. I've got to think some of the people have stopped eating, and they're watching this miracle unfold. Where is Jesus getting all this food from? But the disciples know, and now you and I know. There's something special about this moment. And I might sit back, and you might be sitting back saying, well, that's great, that's Jesus. That's the disciples. What's it mean to me? Well, it means that we are called to remember what we are called to do. Jesus has loaves and fish in his hands. We sometimes wonder if what we are bringing for someone else, to console them, to listen to them, to solve a problem, to relieve them in some way, to feed them, to heal them, whatever it is we're called to do when someone comes before us and presents themselves in the name of the Lord, you know, we might question whether we have enough to do what is needed. Jesus takes fish, takes loaves, and feeds multitudes. You might think, I can't do that. But it's important to remember that Jesus is showing the disciples what to do. Will the disciples pick up on this? Let me give you an example of people picking up on things. Several years ago, I heard a story about a priest in Portland, Maine, a retired priest. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, what do retired priests do all day long? I mean, they must have a lot of time on their hands. Well, this fellow, you know, he was aware that in the city park near where he lived, there were homeless people. There were people who would stop by during the day who were unemployed, that were looking for food. Sometimes charitable groups came by and brought food, but not every day. Well, somehow, this retired priest acquired a shopping basket from a supermarket. I won't ask how he did that. But you know, he started making sandwiches and bringing them to the park. And he did that almost every day. He would feed the people. Well, in time, someone at the local newspaper heard about this. First it was a photographer. Then there was a reporter to interview him. Wouldn't you know, he made the papers in Portland, Maine. Well, next thing you know, this retired priest is getting mail from people who saw the picture in the paper or read the article. He's getting mail. And, hey, Father, way to go. Good work. Here's a check. Here's a donation to help continue your good work. And I don't know whether it was this retired priest's mother or the good Catholic nuns in school who taught him to send thank you notes. He started sending back thank you notes to all these folks. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Brown, dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, thank you for your generous gift. I appreciate very much your desire to see hungry people being fed. You know what, folks? Here's your check back. Go and make your own sandwiches and share them with the hungry. Yeah. You know, we have to remember that when loaves and fishes are in Jesus' hand, tremendous things can happen. But we are not empty-handed ourselves. Consider the possibility that even when we think we don't have enough to offer, if we listen to the Lord Jesus, watch his example, take him to heart, he is showing us how we can take even what we might think might be awfully limited and turn it into something that responds to someone's need in the heart, in the soul, in the body, in the pit of the stomach. Yes, we can do this. We can do this. For some of us, we're thinking this is a new idea. Let's start a new tradition in our lives. For others of us who have been open to this possibility, have been doing things, hey, just like the people who wrote to the Good Father in Maine, keep up the good work. Keep doing this. Let's face it. People like traditions. And nice traditions. Let's find ways to keep them alive, okay? Let's go and do the work of the Lord. Let's go and take what Jesus gives us and put it to work ourselves.